my name is Emma, and today for Mental Illness Awareness Week, I'm going to be giving you guys some mental illness book recommendations. Now, all throughout this week, I'm going to be talking about mental illness and books. So you can take any book I mentioned this week as a recommendation if you'd like, but I did want to have one specific video dedicated to talking about books about mental illness that I have loved and that I think everyone should read. Also, as a little disclaimer, I do have a kind of similar video later in the week titled Books That Spoke to My Mental Illness, where I talk about things that have really related to me and stories that I've really identified with. So a lot of the books that are my favorites that I'm going to be recommending to you today may show up later again. So when some books overlap with those videos, the way I'm trying to keep them separate is this video is going to be purely about content, whereas later in the week I'm going to be talking about experience. So for all the books today, I'm going to be giving you a synopsis. I'm going to be telling you what aspects I liked about it, why I'd recommend it to you guys, why I think you should read them, whereas later in the week, all I'm going to be talking about is how I related to them and why they were important to me and why they really spoke to my particular illnesses. So just as a disclaimer, today you're getting some recommendations and let's just get on with that. The first book I have to show you guys is Every Last Word by Tamara Ireland Stone. If you guys have been on my channel for a while, you've probably heard me rave about this because I love this book with all of my heart. Every Last Word follows a girl named Samantha who suffers from pure OCD, otherwise known as purely obsessional. This means Samantha suffers from mostly the obsessional thoughts of OCD, but not as many of the compulsions. I didn't know that this was a thing until I read this book, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is the first that you're hearing of it, but basically, the way I can think to describe it is, one of the first scenes in this book, Samantha has scissors and she gets really locked onto this thought that she's going to cut something with these scissors and she feels like she has to, but she doesn't actually cut anything with the scissors, if that makes sense. So the only people in Samantha's life that know about her OCD are herself, her family, and her therapist. Samantha has been friends with the popular girls in school for all of her life. She has this established friend group despite them not being the best people in the entire world, but she has not told them about her OCD in fear of losing that kind of protection that she has from the outside world. So Samantha meets this girl named Caroline who she's never seen in school before, but they have this instant connection that she's never had with a girlfriend before. Caroline introduces Samantha to something called Poets Corner, where basically a bunch of misfits in Sam's school go underneath the drama department to an abandoned room that nobody really knows about, and they share poetry with each other. And so this whole story is about Samantha coming to terms with her OCD, making new friends, possibly leaving behind old friends, possibly telling new friends about her OCD, and kind of just coming to terms with herself and her disorder and where she is in life right now. This is a really, really powerful book. There is a big part of this book that I will not spoil it for you because it is so amazing, but everything about this book is fantastic and you will absolutely not expect the direction it goes in. My family are not big readers, but they do see all these books and they take them off my shelf every once in a while to read them. And actually, my mother and my sister both read Every Last Word and loved it, and I am just so in love with this story, and I think so many more people need to read it. While I have never personally been diagnosed with OCD, I have definitely suffered from the obsessional thoughts on occasion that Samantha does suffer from, which I think a lot of people can relate to, so I think even if you don't suffer from OCD, you're going to be able to take something out of this story. I was actually able to meet Tamara in New York City for her launch event for Every Last Word, and it was just such a lovely experience being able to talk to her. At the event, Tamara had discussed how the inspiration from this story came from an actual person who she knew that suffered from pure OCD. So I think the fact that while it's not based on a true story, it's based on a true person just gives this book a thread of authenticity that most books don't have, and so I think it just adds a really interesting element to the story knowing that this is based off of a person and not just a made-up character. If OCD and anxiety is something you want to read more about, or if you just want a really great contemporary story about a girl who's dealing with some struggling times, there is so much in this book that I think everyone can get out of, and I would totally recommend it. The next book I have to show you guys is The Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick. Because of the way the story is told, it's really hard to give a synopsis, but I do know that a lot of people are familiar with the story, or at least the movie adaptation. All I can really say is it's about this man named Pat who comes home after being away for a while, and he is totally focused on getting things back to where they were before with his wife Nikki. So as Pat is trying to adjust to normalcy again and living at home with his parents and getting his life back together, he meets this girl named Tiffany who kind of complements certain parts of him and just leads to a really interesting dynamic. That's all I really want to say about this story, but don't let that little bit of information I have fed you put you off from it at all. What I love about the Silver Linings Playbook is the narrative it's told in. This is the kind of story where you do not know what is going on or what is going to happen until the narrator actually tells you. I think this type of narrative is really important to mental health books because I feel like a lot of the times that's how it actually develops, if that makes sense. I think the unreliable narrative of the Silver Linings Playbook is one of its greatest assets, and this is another book that you will just not expect anything from, and it will totally blow your mind. This is another fabulous, fabulous novel that my sister and my mom have both read and loved, and I loved it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and this is totally one that you should definitely pick up. This is an older book. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it, have read the book, have seen the movie. I don't care. If you haven't read it or you don't know the story, you should totally experience it. The next book I have to show you guys is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. I actually have an interview with Adam and we're talking about More Happy Than Not, so if you'd like to check that out, that'll be linked in the description of this video. More Happy Than Not follows a boy named Aaron Soto who is living in the Bronx, and I would say this takes place a couple years into the future because scientists have developed this procedure called the Lateo procedure, where basically you can eliminate and totally remove certain memories from your mind. And so Aaron has not had the most ideal life. He's grown up in poverty. His dad committed suicide in their one-bedroom apartment when he was just a child. His mom works too much. Doesn't have a good relationship with his brother. He really just has had a really rough time. Aaron has been dating this girl named Genevieve for quite a while, and she is super supportive, but all of a sudden this new boy named Thomas comes into town and has Aaron questioning pretty much everything he's ever known. So this is the story of Aaron coming to terms with the fact that he is gay and considering getting the Lateo procedure to forget that he is gay. This is a book that will have you crying non-stop. I'm not a big crier when it comes to books, especially standalones and not like a series I'm invested in, but I cried all throughout this book. It's a total tearjerker. Now, I don't really know if this was Adam's intention while writing this book. I could be making this up. But one thing I really, really appreciate about this book is while it does deal with the topic of suicide, obviously, with Aaron's father committing suicide, I can see so many parallels to the act of suicide and the Lateo procedure. While Aaron is not necessarily considering taking his own life, he is considering killing a part of him that is ingrained into his being and the reason he is the person he is today, which I think can be very, very closely related to actually committing suicide. Like I said, I don't know if that's what Adam wanted this book to be, but I saw that in this book and it was really, really powerful to me. If you're looking for a book about LGBT characters written by an LGBT author that also deals with suicide and just all the feels, More Happy Than Not is definitely for you. The next book I have to show you guys is Paperweight by Meg Haston. Now, despite the fact that I have been reading pretty avidly for the past 3 years and eating disorders is a topic that I hold very close to my heart, I actually had not read a fiction novel about an eating disorder until Paperweight, and I read this book only a couple months ago. So for that fact, this book holds a very special place in my heart, but it is all about this girl named Stevie who has been suffering from anorexia and is sent away to a treatment center miles and miles from her home and her family, everything she's ever known, to start treatment. And if there is one thing you know about eating disorders, people in that situation do not want help. Recovery is their worst nightmare, so it is a very, very interesting story to read. Now, to kind of up the ante a little bit, Stevie is meant to be at this treatment center for about 60 days, but she's only planning on being there for about 30. The reason being, she's coming up on the anniversary of her brother's death, which she faults herself for, and she plans on committing suicide that day. So this book is all about Stevie's struggle joining treatment, still suffering from her anorexia, but being forced to recover, which she doesn't want to do, and she also wants to commit suicide. There is so much going on in this book, and it is fantastic. As somebody who has suffered from anorexia, I can tell you, if you were ever interested in looking into the mind of an anorexic, this is the book you need to read. It is honestly so raw and authentic. Honestly, sometimes it scared me how accurate it was. It is that powerful. And for that reason, I do want to put a disclaimer here. I haven't put any on the other books, but specifically with this one, if you are somebody who is suffering from an eating disorder and you are not in the ideal place of recovery, I would hold off on this book because for me it was very triggering despite being a fantastic read. It is so real that I think it can be very damaging if you're not reading it in the right mindset. I obviously don't know your story, so if it's something that you want to pick up, go for it, but I'm just letting everyone know, not even people who might be suffering from this book is so tough to read because it is so real. We'll be talking about this one later, obviously, but Paperweight is fantastic, and if you're looking for a book about eating disorders, I would totally recommend it. Next on my list, I have Made You Up by Francesca Zappia. This is a book about a girl named Alex who's suffering from early onset schizophrenia. This has been something that Alex has suffered through for most of her life. Schizophrenia can be a very isolating disorder, so Stevie has spent most of her life with just her family, and the only experience she's ever had with a friend that she feels was actually deemed a hallucination by her mother in a grocery store when she was about 8 years old. So as Alex is getting ready for the year at a new school and a fresh start, she walks into her first class and the boy sitting in front of her is none other than the person she thought she hallucinated all those years ago. So this book is all about Alex's struggle between determining what is reality and what is just a hallucination. What I think is so important about this book is Alex suffers from visual hallucinations in addition to delusions, and visual hallucinations are not something that is touched upon by the media at all. Anytime you really hear about schizophrenia, it's normally some homeless person that is shouting at the sky and saying that voices are telling them to kill people. And as somebody who has suffered from psychosis, this is a seriously accurate representation of the disorder. One thing I really love about Alex is because she suffers from visual hallucinations, she walks around with a digital camera and a magic 8-ball that kind of helps her determine what is real and what is just her psychosis, which I thought was such a fantastic element to this novel. This is another novel that is just so emotional. It has the same shock factor of every last word, and there is just so many things that are going to go into this book that you are not going to expect. I think this is honestly one of my favorite books of all time. It is just that fantastic. It meant that much to me, and I never hear anyone talk about it. So please, if you are interested in reading more about schizophrenia, or if you are just looking for a really great coming-of-age story, please pick up Made You Up by Francesca Zappia and give this book the recognition it deserves. And the final book that I want to recommend to you guys in this video is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I actually recently read this book for this week because I knew that I was going to love The Perks of Being a Wallflower and I was going to want to include it in this video. I've never heard anyone say this before, but maybe I'm just added to the loop, but I see a lot of similarities between the storytelling of The Silver Linings Playbook and The Perks of Being a Wallflower. The narrative is the same, where the protagonist is kind of telling you things as they are happening and you have no way to predict what is going on or what the actual issue is. All I can really say is it follows this boy named Charlie as he is starting out his freshman year. At the end of 8th grade, Charlie's best friend committed suicide, and so he's kind of going into high school as a loner, but very quickly he makes friends and kind of adapts to his environment. But of course there are a lot of struggles that Charlie goes through in this transition, and so this is another book that is just absolutely powerful and life-changing. I knew I would love this book, but I didn't know I would love it this much. If you start this book from page 1, you will get addicted. It is a very quick and easy read, but other than that, the story itself is so intoxicating and the characters are so wonderful and you just want to learn more about them. The way that mental illness is approached in this book is really crucial, and I had so much appreciation for that specific aspect. This is honestly just a fantastic book, and I'm trying to say more things, but I don't want to spoil things, so I think you understand why it's hard for me to say anything, but I love this book so much. I feel like I'm the last person on the planet to read The Perks of Being a Wallflower, but if you hadn't read it yet, please pick it up. I promise you, you will love it. It is fantastic, and it has totally reserved a special place in my heart for books about mental illness. Alrighty, well, that is it for my mental illness book recommendations. I obviously have a ton more that I have read, that I have loved, that I would recommend to you guys, but these are the top of my list that I think more people should read if they're interested in reading more about mental disorders. Let me know in the comments of the video your favorite mental illness book, and maybe I'll be able to pick that one up if it wasn't mentioned in this video. And of course, don't forget to enter my mental illness gigantic international book giveaway. All the guidelines and information for that will be in the description of this video. But that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for another video. Bye!